One of the absolute truths of getting older is that you are going to have more health challenges. However, researchers at a university in Canada have probed the age at which the human body is no longer able to recover as well as it did from sickness and injury. And let's get into whether there is such a thing as a definite number, because we are all genetically different. We will all have different lifestyles, different diets, different approaches to exercise. But taking the law of averages, these clever people have said 75 is the age beyond which health deficits begin to accumulate. Dr. Diane Cooper is the chief executive of EduFit in County Laois and is a clinical exercise physiologist who has worked with older people for many years. Diane, good morning.
Good morning, Will. Thanks for having me.
Do you believe that there is an age that's a hard line past which we might as well go to bed and stay there?
Never. So, look, it's an interesting question. Obviously, from a physiological and many other perspectives, we're not going to live forever. But in my line of work, when we look at people at 60, 65, 70, 75, 80, I have the benefit of kind of observing differences between people who get to those ages in an untrained state versus people who get to those ages in a well-trained state. And there is a world of a difference in terms of aging and functionality and health status, completely different profiles.
So let's try and maybe talk about what you can do to mitigate it, because there will be some, at least, universal truth in that. What lifestyle might contribute to the body breaking down more quickly?
Yeah, so I suppose maybe just to give you a few examples, even from my own research, I had a quick read of the research that you're talking about there, and it's very kind of complicated molecular stuff that they're doing, which is brilliant. But if we bring it back to how we operate, in a non-kind of scientific way, I'll just give you a quick example of one of my own PhD studies, whereby I would have taken in groups of people of all ages between kind of 30 and 80. And the characteristic I was looking for was that they were sedentary and they were untrained. So they weren't fit and they didn't kind of move a whole lot in their daily lives, right? So we put them through just 12 weeks of training. So we got them fitter and we got them stronger. And you can be obviously very specific about that. But what I was doing was I was looking at like what we call biomarkers of health and wellness, right? So I would take blood samples and I would look at markers in the liver, in muscle, in fat tissue, from the brain, and we would look and see at how they would change in response to a stimulus, which in this case was exercise, right? And so regardless of what age the person was, whether they were 35 or whether they were 75, them being unfit and sedentary, and actually they were actually in the overweight category as well, meant that all of those markers of health were not what we would like to see, basically. And we would say the same for their fitness levels and for their strength levels. So this is even in the younger people. And then we train them.
What degree of exercise did you introduce? How vigorous?
Oh, not very much at all. So as in vigorous wise. So they were doing 4 sessions a week. They were averaging about 60 minutes. And they were working at what we would call moderate intensity. So if in simple terms, that means if I was beside you, for example, if you were walking, you'd be slightly out of breath, obviously, because you're walking, but you would be well able to talk to me. We call it the talk test. So it wasn't even intense work. And when we tested everyone at the end of that, so we tested all the blood samples again, and we see that everything is moving in a much more favourable profile. So, reducing risk of cardiovascular diseases, reducing risk of type 2 diabetes. We actually took muscle samples as well. And now this is not new information. Anyone who works in exercise will tell you this, but we took muscle samples from the thigh as well. And what we see is over just the 12 weeks, they grow, their muscle fibers get bigger, they get stronger. And basically, when you add up and analyse all of this stuff, what happens is they're fitter and they're stronger. And the age, if we want to say, the age that they were before the study is very different to the age that they are at the end. It's we call exercise anti-aging because it reduces the age of the body. And in line with that, what we would see is the fittest people are generally the ones who live longer, and the strongest people are the ones who will live very, very well up until end of life, whatever age that is. So in terms of anti-aging, we have a really powerful solution in terms of getting ourselves fit and getting ourselves strong in whatever way you enjoy that to be.
So does the degree of improvement wear off with age? So when you had that spread of different people, did the gains become less pronounced the older they were?
So there's two terms that we use. There's we say relative change, which means the amount of change relative to where that person started at, and then we will talk about absolute change, which means maybe they can lift X amount of kilos more. It's like 4 kilos or 6 kilos or whatever. But in terms of the relative change in that particular study, now just in that one, it's very, very similar. But if we stick with that train of thought, if you have an athlete who's been very, very, very well trained all of their life, so the whole way through up until and still kind of competing and doing stuff in their 70s. Obviously, the speed at which they can move and the physical loads that they can lift will be different in their 70s than they were in their 20s and 30s, right? So that will change, even in the elite of us. That will change as we get older. But the flip side of that is for the people who were never trained, I've every single day in my career, I get to see people in their 70s who are stronger, fitter, have better blood pressure, better lots of things if I measure blood samples than people in their 40s because they train. So it's not a simple answer, but what I can tell you is that the people who train and are active and they use lifestyle medicine, so healthy eating, lots of movement, try to manage their stress levels, try to live well. We have a very, very, very different profile at all decades in life, and that is particularly true when you get to older age, because particularly you talk about that study. You'll probably read that from the age of 60, sarcopenia sets in. That's where we lose a huge amount of muscle strength and function. But that's not true. It's not as true and severely mitigated for people who train. So the rules are very, very different. The aging rules are very different at all stages of life for people who are fit and strong.
I thought it was interesting as well that potentially AI could play a part in more accurate monitoring of the aging process. Also, how different body systems can age at different rates. The immune system, of course, being one that we rely on so much. And there was also a reference to that feeling that some people get as if they have aged overnight. And that can be a real phenomenon in the sense that aging isn't necessarily linear. It can accelerate and decelerate.
Yeah, so that would be something that would be said in my field a lot, particularly, for obviously for men and women, but particularly for menopausal women, where there has been a massive hormone change. So all these biomarkers that I'm talking about, they all change massively at that stage in life. And so you get a very aggressive kind of accelerated aging. So you get an aggressive loss of muscle, strength and function, an aggressive loss of bone, a more aggressive loss in cardiovascular health, in brain health. And now that does happen to men too. So, this kind of in the 50s is where people will say to me, I feel like I've aged overnight. I'm creaking. Everything is aching. I can't do the things that I used to do even only 5 or 6 years ago. And that is absolutely true. But as the 20-year career I've had, I don't hear those things for the people, half as much for people who have trained all their lives. But it seems to be very rapid and significant for people who don't train in those kind of mid 50 years. But obviously the positive flip side of that is when we get people into training, they can recover their muscle, they can recover their strength and function, they can recover all of these things, and often can end up fitter and stronger and feeling better than they did 10 or 15 years ago. So all of these things are possible, but I would say, I've studied accelerated aging extensively. Just one little example, actually, never mind everyone in their 50s, but I've done a lot of work with the European Space Agency over the years, and what we do with them is we take young males, so they're in their 20s, maybe 20 to 30 years of age. They're very young, they're healthy, they're fit, they're lean, they've no kind of cholesterol or other kind of those health issues, and we put them into bed rest for 60 days. And we see what happens. It's basically an accelerated aging model in these young people. And for example, just in like one of the studies we did ourselves, over 60 days, these young men, because we removed movement, physical activity. Now, obviously, that's a unique
it's
situation.
Extreme action, yeah.
Yeah, it's extreme physical inactivity. So, in other words, it's accelerated aging. But like in that 60 days, they lose up to 4 kilos of muscle. They lose massive amounts of strength. They lose huge amount of fitness. Like their cardiovascular system declines. Now, not to unsafe levels, and obviously we retrain them and recondition them, but all of those biomarkers that we look at in liver and muscle and fat tissue, they all change really unfavourably, and they would be reflective of what we would see in much older people. So what I'm saying is, if you remove movement, and if people lose fitness and lose strength, even in 20s and 30s, in that type of a unique situation, the body will age. So, the powerful tool that we have there, if we want to live long and live well, is to get as fit as possible and as strong as possible, is basically what I see day in, day out.
Yeah, and the other moral of the story, as cliched as it sounds, is that it's never too late to start. But
never.
I imagine do it under guidance as well, because the older we get, the more susceptible to injury we become.
Sure, yeah, but absolutely. Now that's true through all of the decades. But like, just to give you some practical examples, just one of our kind of in-person classes. This time last year we had actually it was the summer of last year, we had a new group of people come in for a 12-week program, and most of the people are between 60 and 80 years of age who've never done strength training. We test them all at the start. We, get some idea of strength and fitness levels and all of that type of stuff. Put them through 12 weeks of training, and obviously, as always, everything improves, which is great. But they didn't want to stop, so we pushed on from there, and we now have people in their up to 88 years of age in the classes swinging their kettlebells, lifting weights that they've never done in their lives. They are completely different people than they were 12 months ago. So even well into your 80s, you can regain. I see it all of the time. You can regain so much function. If I had recorded some of our lovely, lovely people coming in through the door 12 months ago, how they walk, how they stand up, their balance, just moving from A to B is completely different to how they're moving now, swinging their kettlebells and doing their weights and their squats and their lunges and their balance training. So, and genuinely we have people 88 and 89 years of age in some of our sessions. So it is never too late, but yes, you absolutely need to be doing it under expert advice and expert guidance, particularly if you're starting in your late 70s or early 80s and you have unfortunately got some of the age-related issues that we see, because you had been living different lifestyles up until then. But it is never too late, and if you get the right guidance, things can also and always improve.
Indeed, and even at a younger age, if you have a niggle from a previous injury when you were younger, there are ways of working around that too when you have qualified advice in your ear. I'm afraid that's all we have time for. I would love to come back and pick up on that name drop of the European Space Agency and find out more about your work on that, Diane, but that'll have to wait for a different day. Thanks for the call.
Thanks a million, Will.